Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Holland, and I'd like to welcome to our webinar today. I'm the Chief Development Officer of Pinchin, based in Richmond, BC, and I'll be moderating today's session on new and emerging energy upgrade incentives, which is a collaboration between Pinchin's Mechanical Engineering Group and FortisBC. As we have this webinar today, we're looking at the highest levels of PM 2.5 and air pollution parts of southern BC where I live due to the forest fires in the US. So the conversation we're having today really around greenhouse gas and climate change and how we can mitigate that through building occupation is more relevant than ever. So I thank you all for attending and being part of this journey. Yes, next slide please, Andrew. Just a note, I'll be moderating the session, and there will be a short feedback survey at the end for you all to fill out, if you wouldn't mind, just when we end with the questions. So, as I mentioned, many of us hope that the pandemic will make us look at the environment more holistically and our impact on biodiversity. And as we look at climate change and our impact in buildings, that's more relevant than ever. Happily, for all of us, there are a number of incentives for building owners and operators to take advantage of through Fortis, which has some additional inducements because of the pandemic, Clean BC and BC Hydro, which will be helping us all move in that direction more easily. The presentation today will summarize how those incentives work, where they may best apply in different settings, and how you can do that. So with that, I'd like to introduce our two speakers this afternoon. Next slide, please, Andrew. So our first speaker is Andrew Byrnes, who's also doing, oh yes, a few notes on the Zoom interface. Let's just go back one, Andrew. I'll just talk about the Zoom interface. Very briefly, get comfortable, make sure your volume works for our speaking. We have some features to help you with this. The chat is purely for your own connectivity. If you can't see, can't hear, go to the chat box, top right-hand corner, on my screen at least, and we'll try and help you get connected. If you could all raise your hands to make sure our volumes are working and you can hear us properly. That'll be a check of our volume. And the Q&A is for you to ask questions, which I'll be moderating. So any questions you have, we'll put to the speakers at an appropriate time, and maybe the end, maybe in the presentation, and we'll try and answer as many questions you give us as we can. But we thank you for your participation. Next, please, Andrew. So as I mentioned, we hope that the pandemic will make us look at our environment more holistically and our impact on climate change and biodiversity. So with that, I'm going to introduce our two speakers, and myself, of course. Our first speaker is Andrew Byrnes, and he's a professional engineer specializing in district energy systems, concept planning, feasibility, and assessment. He is a leader in the development of ambient temperature district energy systems, incorporate renewable energy, heat recovery, and many of those projects that he's been involved with have reduced the project's greenhouse gas emissions by up to 90%. So a truly impressive background there. Andrew is a licensed PEng, professional engineer in BC, Alberta, and Nova Scotia, where he does projects, and is a member of ASHRAE, the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers. Andrew holds a Master of Science in Engineering from the University of Pennsylvania and a Master's Certificate in Project Management. Following or speaking with Andrew will be Ian Mitchell of FortisBC. Ian's an experienced energy management professional with a history working on sustainability goals through energy efficiency projects. At Fortis, Ian oversees a wide range of sectors, including large commercial office, retail, federal and provincial government, and transportation. Before joining FortisBC, Ian worked at QMC Metering Solutions, designing demand management initiatives in buildings. Ian's also a certified energy manager, and he currently sits on the Energy and Environment Committee at BOMA BC. So with that, I'd like to welcome you both and welcome our audience and hand the presentation over to Andrew. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our training session this afternoon. We have a couple of interesting programs we wanted to make this presentation on that are focused on custom energy studies and energy efficiency improvements for buildings. I want to begin by noting that these are BC-based programs, so applicable only to those buildings in BC. I know we have a number of attendees from all over Canada, and even if you're maybe based yourself in Ontario or another province, for those buildings within your managed portfolios or that you have responsibility for that are located in BC are available to take advantage of these programs. So as I mentioned, there's two very exciting and interesting programs available right now, revolving around incentive funding for energy studies and energy efficiency measures. The two programs are similar but different. There's one program that's administered by BC Hydro on behalf of Clean BC. This is the Clean BC Custom Program, which is oriented around fuel switching and electrification projects as a means of saving greenhouse gas emissions. So those types of projects that fit into that program are things like air source heat pump installations, geo-exchange installations, wastewater heat recovery, or other applications of heat pumps that result in fuel switching off of natural gas and onto electricity. The other program, similar, is administered by FortisBC, and this is called the FortisBC Custom Performance Program. Again, this program provides energy study funding for implementing measures that save natural gas through natural gas reduction or conservation. And that applies both to natural gas, which is the predominant service delivered by Fortis in BC, but it also applies to electricity customers in the Okanagan region, where Fortis actually is the electricity service provider. Types of programs or projects available for funding and study under the Fortis program include things like high efficiency equipment upgrades, controls optimizations, heat recovery chillers, and envelope upgrades. So similar but slightly different from the Clean BC program. These are all measures that focus on conservation of natural gas through improved efficiency. So what are the qualification thresholds to take advantage of these programs? These are oriented towards larger buildings, buildings that use roughly in the order of $20,000–$25,000 worth of natural gas per year. Programs look for savings in either natural gas or greenhouse gas emissions. Clean BC measures in greenhouse gas emissions savings, and they're looking for projects that can save roughly 80 tons of CO2 per year, which equates to around 1,600 gigajoules of gas. They also offer a light program, which provides energy study funding for measures that could save 34 tons of gas or 34 tons of CO2, or roughly 700 gigajoules of gas per year. And the Fortis program also is looking for buildings of similar size, around that $20,000–$25,000 worth of gas use per year, where you have the potential to save around 1,200 gigajoules of gas, or 50,000 kilowatt hours of electricity for those customers in the electricity service area. Just going back to this slide for a sec. So you may be asking yourself, which of these programs would my building fit into? And it's a good question to ask, because it depends a little bit on the circumstances of the building and what your own objectives are. For those clients and building management teams that are looking at greenhouse gas savings as a priority, perhaps you have sustainability mandates from your organization, or initiatives to reduce natural gas use and transition onto the heat pump based heating systems, then the Clean BC program is really a great fit, because this is really around transitioning off of natural gas and onto electrically driven heat pump systems. If your building is not necessarily, or your organization is not necessarily driven by sustainability objectives right now, at least given the current pandemic and capital situation that many organizations are facing, maybe the Fortis program is an avenue that's worth investigating, because this program is more based around natural gas savings through high efficiency equipment upgrades, and really focuses on saving natural gas, which results directly in operating cost savings. So how to apply for these programs? Again, these programs offer energy study funding, capital incentive funding for implementing energy conservation measures. And the first step to going down this path is to complete an application form, either to Clean BC or through FortisBC. you can work with Pinchin or your key account manager to identify and apply for the program. There's a fairly straightforward application form that needs to be filled out. Describe the systems that are looking to be studied, provide some basic information on the building, and then a description of energy conservation measures that you'd like to investigate at the building. And this is something that Pinchin is able to assist with. Many people on the call, we've worked closely with you before and have some familiarity with the buildings within your portfolios that you manage. And it's something we're happy to help out with taking a first look at some relevant building data and helping you identify whether any buildings could be candidates for further energy study under this program. So what exactly is provided through these programs? As I mentioned, there's two key pieces of funding available for projects. The first thing that these programs offer is funding for energy studies. And an energy study is a detailed look at your building, look at the energy use patterns in the building and the current condition and performance of mechanical systems. An energy study would identify conservation measures that could be implemented to reduce either greenhouse gas emissions or energy use or cost, and includes capital cost and a business case for those measures. Things like payback, annual operating cost savings, and energy savings can be presented. And finally, include some recommendations. What are some of the best low-hanging fruit to take forward for actual implementation? And both of these programs, the Clean BC and Fortis program, offer funding for energy studies. Clean BC provides 50% cost reimbursement for the cost of an energy study, up to $20,000. And Fortis has a program on right now through March of next year where they're offering 100% funding for an energy study. So for buildings that qualify, the building management team can receive an energy study for no cost, looking at the energy use and condition and making recommendations for energy conservation. The second piece of funding that's available then is comes after an energy study, and this is funding for capital implementation of the measures. It includes both engineering design and installation cost, and both programs calculate an incentive for energy efficiency measures based on various metrics. Under Clean BC, it's strictly based on dollars per ton of greenhouse gas savings, and Fortis has a different formula based on the incremental cost of the project and the savings that can be realized from its implementation. So I'll pass it over to Ian now, who's going to go into a little bit more detail about the Fortis Custom Incentive Program.
Thanks, Andrew, and welcome everyone. And thanks, John, for the introduction earlier. Again, my name's Ian Mitchell, and I'm a key account manager at Fortis for large commercial accounts. Next slide, Andrew. So most of you are probably well aware of Fortis is, but we're actually the largest energy provider in the province. We provide natural gas in the blue region you see up on the screen, but we're also in the green region, which is in the Kelowna and Kootenay region. We're the electric utility as well. So we provide both gas and electric service there. Next slide, Andrew. So about a year ago, in response and recognition of federal and provincial targets on greenhouse gas emissions, we announced our clean growth pathway to 2050. And part of that is our roadmap 30 by 30. So this is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30% by 2030. So it's very ambitious. We're actually one of the first utilities across North America to have a target like this, and we're very excited what the next 10 years has to offer. Next slide, Andrew. So how we're going to get there, there's really 4 key pillars. The last two, the global LNG and zero carbon emission or fuels for vehicles, I won't touch on in this presentation. I'm going to focus primarily on energy efficiency, but also renewable natural gas. So for those that you aren't aware, we offer our customers currently renewable natural gas, which is a carbon neutral energy source. We have right now about 4 facilities across the province, and it's a biogas. So we collect methane off of a landfill or dairy farm. We clean, scrub it, and inject it into our existing piping infrastructure. So right now we have our supply of around just less than 1%, but over the next 10 years, we're going to get up to 15%. So that's a huge undertaking, and we're going to not going to be able to get there just with biogas. We're also looking at biomass. We signed a number of months ago our largest agreement with Ren Energy up in the interior for pulp and paper. It'll be producing upwards of 1 million GJs a year. In addition to biomass, we're also looking at hydrogen and hydrogen injection to clean and reduce emissions in our existing infrastructure. Next slide. Oh, just one other thing actually on renewable natural gas. So you can purchase outright 100% if you're a Fortis customer. Right now we have limited supply, but we are getting more supply within the next year and the years following. But you could also buy a blend too. So you could purchase, you could try it out, maybe 10, 15%. And it could really be complemented well with some of the energy efficiency programs I'm going to be talking about today to lower your footprint and emissions. So energy efficiency, part of our 30 by 30 pillar, we're putting a lot of money into demand side management initiatives to beef up existing programs as well as to add new programs into our portfolio. So over the next 3 years, we're going to be spending upwards of $360 million in our energy efficiency programs. Next slide, Andrew. The main program I'm going to talk to you today about is our custom design for existing buildings. Andrew went over some of the key highlights. This involves an energy study, which we actually fund 100% right now due to the current environment that we're in with COVID. But we look at anything that has a reduction on natural gas, or if you're a customer of say, Central Steam or Creative Energy, and which is a gas customer indirectly, you are still eligible. So any customer in the downtown core and on Central Steam is eligible for this program as well. So we look at, we fund measures such as upgrading to condensing equipment, heat recovery chillers is very popular these days, control optimization, to name a few. We have a minimum savings target of 1,200 GJs a year, but if you have one project that doesn't quite hit that target, you might, if you look to others within your portfolio, we will accept that. So if we could combine different buildings into one larger study to get to those targets. Next slide, Andrew. So I just want to walk you through the process. So to start off, you have to understand that there's a need to look a little bit deeper into your building and to do an energy study. So you want to understand what you want to look at a high level to reduce gas or steam. Then you need to select a approved consultant that's on our list on our website, such as Pinchin, who then will set up a kickoff meeting to go through what's involved, look at the energy study, approve the energy study, then you have 6 months to complete this study. Upon completion, you submit it over to Fortis with the calculations. We review it. We determine which energy conservation measure we're able to incent upon and how much, and we outline that in a capital incentive letter. Once you decide you want to move forward with any of those measures, you sign and you have 18 months to complete. And given the environment that we're in with COVID, if you complete an energy study, but you don't quite have the capital right now, I mean, we could look at getting extensions to that 18 months. So please just approach your CAM and we can help you out as best of our ability. Once you install the measures, we do send a technician out to either virtually or in person, depending on how safe it is, to inspect, make sure they're installed, and then we issue a check at the end. Next slide, Andrew.
Just want to add one thing, Ian, that you touched on previously, but you know, these these custom programs are designed, as you mentioned, for fairly larger buildings, those with a significant natural gas load that could then qualify for a substantial amount of natural gas savings. But not every building is going to have, not every organization will have buildings that use that much natural gas. So your point around this program also being available for a portfolio of buildings is a really interesting and useful approach to it. So just off the top of my head, if you were, say, a school district or a government, a municipality that has a portfolio of buildings around a defined geographic area, any one of them alone might not consume $25,000 worth of natural gas per year. But as a portfolio, you might look at, say, 10 schools or 5 municipal buildings that could be combined and look at a program of energy efficiency upgrades or something like that that could then meet the threshold required. Is that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good point. I'm glad you brought that up again. So yeah, you can look at a portfolio level. That could be looking at, say, for example, controls, and looking at a portfolio of, say, 5 buildings. You want to look at control optimization. We could roll that into our program, or looking at other buildings that may be in the same geographical area or same in design and same size, same usage. Those are all criteria that it's very common actually for a number of my customers to approach me and not quite able to meet that target, but when they pool to other buildings together, they are. And also, I just want to say, what that 1,200. I mean, if you have a project that's around 1,000, or if you think there's going to be savings there, I mean, approach me regardless, even if it's just one building, because there might be opportunity.
So for portfolio buildings, Ian, coming back to this slide, then maybe you could explain if the application form is the same. Is it one application for a portfolio of buildings?
Yeah, so if you're doing a portfolio, we still just have the one application. It depends on, I mean, typically the ones I've worked on, it's been around 3, 4, 5 buildings, and yeah, we just use the one application. We want to make it streamlined and as simplistic for customers as possible. Yeah, but if there's a need to, say, break it up, then we could evaluate it at the time, because there is a cap also on the energy study funding of $50,000. But if you think there's a lot of looking at portfolio, there's going to be savings that surpass that, say, 1,200 or much higher. There's ways we could look at that and maybe break it up into 2 projects, for example, if it's going to get up above that level of 50,000 for energy study.
Great. That's great information.
Yeah.
All right, next slide, move on.
Just want to highlight a few examples of projects that we've worked on fairly recently. This one I was involved with. It was a local transit authority. They installed 9 energy conservation measures, so variable speed drives, infrared heaters, condensing boilers, controls. They also used an innovative way of heat recovery off of the vehicle exhaust in the garage while they're getting maintenance, used to preheat the air supply. So this project has quite significant estimated savings of just over 13,000 GJs a year. It also has significant electrical savings of just over 200,000 kilowatt hours each year, and the incentive amount was over $300,000. So a significant incentive and a very successful project. Next slide, Andrew. The next example, I wasn't involved with this project personally. It was one of my colleagues, but it was upgrading the heating plant, putting in condensing boilers, upgrading the ventilation system, reconfiguring piping and valves. This one actually had 2 energy studies. So typically we say the funding of the energy study, it's usually an ASHRAE level 2 that we look for, but sometimes when the consultant's on site, they might see that there is a need to do a deeper dive in one particular area or system to do more detailed, say, ASHRAE level 3, and there could be funding for that as well to go in depth, either in the same program or maybe lead to another custom program thereafter. This project had savings well, it's quite significant. The reduction, 25% in gas emissions reduced, about just shy of 10,000 GJs a year. They received an incentive just shy of 300,000, and it almost reduced their gas consumption by 25%. So a very successful project. Next slide. So I sort of touched on this a little earlier. In response to COVID-19, we're now paying 100% of energy studies. So this is upfront. After you complete the energy study, we provide the check for 100%. It used to be 50%. And then if you implemented any of the measure, the remaining 50%. But now it's 100% up until March 31st, 2021. So there is a timeline on it right now. This, depending on how COVID unfolds, I mean, there is a possibility it could be pushed back, but we have to get approval from the BCUC on that. So as right now, it's March 31st. Next slide. Also, another thing I want to note for during the COVID, this scenario that we're in, we're also offering a 50% top up on the ECMs that we're able to provide incentives on. So what this really means is, say you have a project or a energy conservation measure that costs $200,000 to put in under our normal conditions, we would be, say, providing $100,000 incentive to, say, upgrade boiler equipment to condensing. Now we'll be adding additional 50% onto that, so it'll be $150,000, up to a maximum 100% of that cost. If it's a cost-effective measure, we could pay almost the entire capital. So to keep that in mind, if you have any projects that you are interested in, there is a deadline again of March 31st, 2021 for implementation, but this possibly could be extended if we get approval from the BCUC, as I mentioned previously. Next slide. Now, you might have some projects that don't necessarily fit with doing an energy study. Say you might have completed one recently. Oh, actually, on that topic, if you have completed an energy study within the last 2 years and didn't actually get funding from Fortis, you could also do a fast track into our custom program. So if we have all the information there and the calculations that are required, we could actually use an existing study that's been completed in the last year or two and potentially produce a capital incentive letter based on that. So just keep that in mind as well. But for prescriptive offers, it's for upgrading equipment that's going to high efficient gas equipment. So upgrading to condensing boilers. We've actually increased that up to a maximum of $60,000 per boiler. We have pipe and tank installation. We have a whole, next slide, Andrew. We have a whole bunch of offerings prescriptively right now. I won't get into all of them today, but at the end of these slides, you'll have my contact details. If you have any questions, you could reach out to me or go to our website. What we're doing with COVID for prescriptive is it's increasing. The main one I want to talk about is if you're installing a condensing boiler, used to be $9 per MBH, now it's $12. And this offer is up until December 31st, 2021. So a little bit longer time horizon than our custom program right now. Next slide. I also want to bring up our continuous optimization program. So this is a revamp of a program that we had out in the market a number of years ago. We're partnered with BC Hydro. So your facility needs to be at least 50,000 square feet. You have to have a DDC or BMS system installed. And it basically is looking for low-hanging fruit. So paybacks that are less than a year or two. And the funds actually go directly to the consultant. We don't administer this program. It's actually BC Hydro, so you have to be approved on BC Hydro's list. But for recommissioning, it's 15 cents per square foot. And if you've participated in the program in the past, it's 2.5 cents per square foot. There's also a third offer, which is a real-time monitoring, more focused towards the electrical side. Next slide. Yeah, so that concludes my portion. I'll answer any questions you may have at the end, but you'll see my contact details here. If you have any questions or if you have any potential projects, please reach out to me and I could get you the information or work with you. Thank you. Back to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Ian. So Ian has spoken a bit about the Fortis program. I want to provide a little bit further details about the Clean BC program, which parallels Fortis is offering in many ways, but has a slightly different focus on greenhouse gas emission savings, rather than on focused on natural gas efficiency and natural gas savings. So the Clean BC program, when we're talking about fuel switching in BC and greenhouse gas savings in BC, is primarily talk about heat pumps. And for those of you not familiar with heat pumps, I know most people in BC would be, because they're very common and very widely adopted. But this is a comparison of heating the same type of building under two different options. A gas boiler, high efficiency of 95% efficiency, would use around 105 megawatt hours of gas, emitting 19,000 tons of CO2, and with an annual fuel cost around $2,700. A heat pump, by comparison, could do the same heating load using 28 megawatt hours of electricity. And because electricity has a much lower carbon intensity compared to natural gas, there's only 300 kilograms of CO2 emitted, which is a 98% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So almost eliminating all greenhouse gas emissions by use of a heat pump over a gas boiler. Of course, electricity is more expensive than natural gas, and so the consuming a smaller amount of electricity still has a comparable or slightly higher annual cost compared to the natural gas option. Heat pumps come in all shapes and sizes. Those most widely used in and around the Lower Mainland and in BC consist of air source and water source systems. Air source heat pumps can be rooftop units, direct expansion VRF type systems. Can also be water source, where you install a water to air heat pump in conjunction with an existing building hydronic system to provide heating and cooling water. Or a water source system that might use heat recovery between heating and cooling systems, or be coupled with a geo-exchange or other type of heat recovery system. You know, heat recovery options are everywhere in buildings, and many of them go untapped because either they're not identified early on, or the business case or opportunity hasn't been there to take advantage of them. You know, we know about lots of heat recovery options, such as heat recovery of ventilation air, heat recovery ventilators. Some of them are quite obvious, but some are less obvious. Here's a few photos with examples to illustrate my point. I mean, ice rinks are a tremendous source of waste heat that's available in many communities. Many of them do take advantage of waste heat recovery within the existing building. Often refrigeration systems have such large volumes of heat available that there's still excess heat that can be shared around, potentially with adjoining buildings or other buildings in the vicinity. Another great waste heat source that often goes overlooked is retail refrigeration and grocery stores. We've been involved with some projects that have made use of grocery store refrigeration system waste heat recovery, and it's such a large and continuous base heating load that you can, through refrigeration heat recovery, provide tremendous proportions of an annual's building heating energy load. It's very if thoughtfully designed and included, it can be a very effective way of reducing natural gas consumption in buildings and promoting heat recovery. And a third option that's often overlooked is wastewater heat recovery. There's systems available in BC that have used wastewater that we flush down the toilets. It's often warm and contains a fair amount of waste heat. That wastewater can be cooled and the heat can be recovered and injected into the building heating system to reduce building natural gas consumption. Heat recovery programs, I'll add. For example, if there's an opportunity to look at heat recovery from one of these sources in your building, heat recovery is available for study funding and capital incentives under both the Clean BC and the FortisBC programs. Here's a case study of a recent project we've been involved with. This is at BCIT's downtown campus. This building is serviced by Central Steam. They're not directly a natural gas customer, but despite that, they are indirectly a natural gas customer because the downtown Vancouver Central Steam system, Creative Energy, uses natural gas for running the boilers in its heating plant. The downtown campus for BCIT has a growing data center in need of a new cooling system. The owner recognized that there's a fairly high cost of energy for building heating because they're connected to the district steam system. And the owner was highly committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I will note that if you are a building that's connected to central steam, there's a very strong business case and environmental case for transitioning off of the district steam and onto heat recovery opportunities. The solution proposed was high temperature heat recovery heat pumps that can provide cooling to the data center and inject heat into the high temperature building loop. Study funding for this program was provided by Clean BC. So what kind of opportunities might help you thinking to your buildings? Boiler replacements is a very common type of project to be looked at under these custom study programs, replacing old inefficient boilers with new high efficiency condensing systems. And as Ian mentioned, even if your building is not large enough to consume the quantity of natural gas needed to qualify for a custom study, it may still be available to you to have a prescriptive type rebate for installing new high efficiency equipment in place of older inefficient systems. Controls upgrades is another great area for investigation under a custom study program. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach because every building is different and every control system is different. But a custom energy efficiency study is a great chance to look at the existing controls, find ways to improve sequencing or do upgrades to outdated equipment, installing modern control systems and revamped control strategies to help improve energy efficiency, save natural gas use, and save carbon emissions. Heat recovery chillers are a great opportunity in Vancouver. Buildings, especially with a 4-pipe type heating cooling system, can benefit from installation of a heat recovery chiller. Again, a heat recovery chiller just extracts waste heat from a existing cooling system, generating chilled water and simultaneous heating water for the building. Wastewater heat recovery, I mentioned earlier, this is a picture of a shark type heat recovery system from a company here in Vancouver. It extracts waste heat from wastewater, cooling down the wastewater before it's returned into the city sewers, and making the waste heat available to space or domestic hot water heating systems in the building. Other envelope-related strategies are great projects for consideration under this program. Insulation or window upgrades to reduce heat loss and reduce energy use. Let's say a roofing replacement project is being considered at one of your buildings. A great time to look at insulation upgrades to reduce heat loss and save energy, potentially receiving some funding for the project through Fortis. Heat recovery ventilators of preheating incoming air with warm exhaust air, also an interesting measure that can be implemented in the Lower Mainland and throughout BC to reduce natural gas use. Rooftop unit replacements. If you've got a decrepit old rooftop unit like this one, probably time to replace. Why not take a look at the building as a whole, identifying energy conservation measures and opportunities to replace this old rooftop unit with a new high efficiency gas or heat pump based system. Hot water heaters also always need replacement, and it's a great time to look at how to replace hot water in a way that's more sustainable. So again, just in summary, there's 3 main steps to these incentive programs: identification, completing an energy study, and then going and designing and building it. Identification starts with a conversation with Pinchin or your key account manager at Fortis or BC Hydro, making an application for your building to Fortis or Clean BC. those buildings that are most well qualified or to take advantage of this program are those that use $20,000 a year in natural gas, either at the building level or amongst a portfolio of buildings. If you're considering mechanical or envelope upgrades already, it's a great time to look at how to do it in a sustainable manner. And the program's open to institutional, residential, commercial, or industrial buildings in BC. Step 2, the energy study includes that energy use profile and the detailed dive into the building energy use and where savings could be realized. Provides cost estimates and a roadmap for going forwards in a way that can take advantage of some of the funding available for high efficiency equipment. And then the last step, you have designing and building the project, completing the design, tendering the work, and getting it installed. So 2 great programs presented today, both Clean BC and FortisBC Energy Study custom incentive programs. But with that, I'll open the slideshow up to any questions that we might have.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Ian. Great presentations. John Holland back here with some of the questions that we got from the audience. One very specifically for you, Ian, on the transit building that you discussed as one of your case studies. What was the size of that building roughly?
Oh, I don't have that number in front of me right now, but it was quite a large facility. I think it was over 100,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe get that number to me and I'll get it back to the participant. He happens to be a Pinchin alumni, so I'm still in touch with him. So I'll get that number over. I'll get it over to everybody, but I'll get it to him specifically. Okay. Great, thank you. Okay. There's of course a lot of conversation about non-market housing and development. I know we're talking about retrofit incentives right now, but are there any specific inducements that would work for non-market housing in this setup?
Yeah, so we have, I mean, I guess we have other programs and offerings for, say, I'll give a few examples. We have programs for nonprofit housing. So we have upwards, like say for a boiler, instead of 60,000 cap, it's up to 75,000. We're also partnered with Hydro for a number of programs that work on the low income housing. So we do have lots of funding available. We also have a program, it's for rental apartment buildings. And this is for purpose-built rentals, and it's a free energy assessment. They'll go into each of these units, each of the suites, and they'll also replace the aerators and faucets to low flow. So that's provided at no cost, and at the end, you get the customer will get an energy study outlining any sort of measures they could execute on or implement to have a higher efficient building. So that's something else that we offer for the rental market.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question, could you combine window replacement incentive with Clean BC and mechanical with Fortis in one big upgrade?
Yeah, so we can't, customers can't double dip. So you can't be going with, say, both Hydro and Fortis for, say, upgrading a chiller to heat recovery. But certainly, yeah, we work with, there might be other studies going on concurrently or afterwards, and Hydro could be involved or Clean BC. One thing I do want to note is that we're actually, didn't want to add any confusion for people during the presentation, but we are partnering with Clean BC on our custom program. So there is additional funding that could come through us. We administer the funds for, let's say, larger items that might have a long payback that don't pass our economic test. There could be funding that comes through Fortis, through the ministry. So you can, yes, to answer your question, John, you can participate with both. You just can't double dip. You can't get incentives for the same measures. But
the question was on window replacement. That would be eligible.
And so yeah, so window, it has to pass our economic test. Windows typically don't typically do. I haven't really worked on many, but it's a possibility. But you could look at Clean BC. There could be funding through Clean BC on that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think one more for you, Ian. It's from Nijin, I think I pronounced the name properly. Under the local health authority slide, you talked about the project savings of 280,000. The question is, how much was invested into the install of the new condensing natural gas boilers and the upgrade of the vent systems? So I guess the capital cost that induced that saving.
Yeah, the capital, and that's a good question. I would have to get back to the group on that because I didn't work on that project myself. So the capital, I'm not sure what exactly that total cost the project came in at. Yeah, and I'll have to get back to you.
Okay, all right. Just to clarify for everybody, this webinar will be recorded. A couple of questions came in about that. It will be recorded and made available on the Pinchin website sometime after today, next couple of days. Maybe a look forward. You know, you've been in this incentive world for some time, Ian and Andrew. What trends do you see in the incentives landscape? Clearly, COVID has made Fortis more available to many owners. Do you see that trend continuing? Will it modify with the greenhouse gas debate? Will government be more supportive? This is not to hold you, and just a prediction of where this is going for the benefit of our audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think energy efficiency is still very much relevant, and our programs, I mean, we continue to improve them and add new programs to the market. Because you want to make your buildings as energy efficient as possible. And then once you do that, then you can look at, say, RNG, renewable natural gas. So you lower your footprint, you lower your usage, and then you could maybe pay a slight premium on to have a carbon neutral energy source, such as renewable natural gas. And for terms of where things go, I mean, we're always trying to add new programs out into the market. I mean, right now we're doing a pilot with gas heat pump technologies, so there's probably very likely to be a program available in the future for that. So we're constantly looking at different ways to add to our existing portfolio of projects. So I think it's going to be, energy efficiency is not going away. I mean, it's going to be very topical. So and it's very important going forward. So there'll be programs for the foreseeable future.
And I think especially with this type of program, which is focused on existing buildings, developing custom solutions, or even a prescriptive type requirement for retrofitting new equipment into existing buildings, you know, 70% of the buildings that we have existing today are going to be the buildings that we're dealing with in year 2030. They've been built, you know, previous to today, and so these are existing buildings that already have an established carbon emissions intensity. And so the only way to look at reducing carbon emissions from buildings has to have a sizable portion of that that's focused on how to deal with existing buildings, not just new construction. So programs like this, the custom energy study that is available for an existing building, is a great type of pathway to get there, to deal with these existing buildings and how to operate them as efficiently as possible.
And of course, renewable natural gas, that's going to be something that adds to an organization's corporate social responsibility and their overall corporate reputation. So there's huge benefit as that becomes more and more available. Okay.
Yeah, and if you start comparing, you know, the types of energy efficiency measures that can be implemented to a building to make it more efficient, comparing it with a baseline case of purchasing renewable natural gas, which is quite a bit more expensive than regular non-renewable natural gas, it improves the payback significantly, right? One of the things that is a laggard of our industry is the low cost of natural gas these days, that makes transitioning onto, you know, electrically driven heat pumps or renewable energy systems makes the business case more challenging. But if you compare to renewable natural gas as a baseline, to compare apples to apples, low carbon sources, it's improves the economics drastically.
Yeah, and just to add to that, in the energy study, in participating in our custom program, you could add that. I do that work with customers all the time, where they actually look at the calculations of, okay, what if we buy renewable natural gas, and add those into there. So once it comes time for a decision on whether we want to upgrade or implement measures, they know the full picture of how to get to their GHG targets long term, and how much it'll cost.
Okay, well, that's good. Good to know. I think that's an excellent summary. We don't have any more questions from the audience, I don't think. So I think with that, I'd just like to thank everybody for their participation in today's session. This is part of a series of webinars Pinchin have been presenting all through the pandemic period, and will continue to produce as we go through this on both pandemic-related issues and issues like this, to educate our client community on how to work around the modern world as well as we can. If you have suggestions, there's a questionnaire coming out to you as we speak, I believe. Please fill that out as honestly and coherently as you can, because we use that, one, to calibrate our presentations, two, to provide new subjects you may want to hear about, where we bring in outside experts to complement our message and be of better value to our community, sharing new ideas. So with that in mind, stay tuned for future presentations. A big thank you to Andrew and to Ian for the presenting. A big thank you to Kaylee and Rui in the background, moving the slides and putting this together, which is no small task. And a big thanks to all of you for being part of our journey towards a more sustainable world. I thank you, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you very much.